Congratulations, your company just survived a ransomware attack. IT worked around the clock, you restored from backups, systems did come back online, and leadership, well, they breathed a big sigh of relief. Crisis averted. Now, 3 months later, different ransomware variant, although the same vulnerabilities are still present. So we got the same panic, the same all-hands emergency response, except this time, the attackers had encrypted your backups too.
WWT presents Research.
Welcome to Worldwide Technology Presents Research. I'm Rob Boyd, and today we're diving into the Cyber Resilience Maturity Model, a 5-level framework that helps organizations move from reactive recovery all the way through to intelligent adaptive resilience. I'm joined today by Madison Horn, WWT's National Security and Infrastructure Advisor, and Rob Joyce, who spent 34 years at the NSA, finishing his career as Cybersecurity Director. Here's where we start. What makes resilience fundamentally different from security?
So, if we think about just like the basic term, like what is cyber resilience, it's a mind shift. We've finally gotten to a point where we have kind of accepted the fact that you are going to get breached. It's just a matter of when. And so the idea of resilience is really to ensure when and if you get breached, is it the least destructive.
For decades, security was about building walls. Resilience accepts that attackers are getting in and plans for how you're going to keep operating anyway.
I don't care how well you prepare, how expertly you defend your network. There's always that new event in the security landscape that we didn't plan for that's going to come and hit you. And whether it's, a grazing blow or a really big knock you down punch, the importance is to do some thinking in advance of, what functions, services, and capabilities do I absolutely have to survive? What is at the core of my business? And then think about how we make that very resilient so that you can continue to push through a bad day.
That changes everything about how you prepare. And when resilience fails, the consequences ripple far beyond IT departments.
When you think about the Colonial Pipeline outage, that didn't impact the IoT that controlled their pipelines. It hit their billing systems. And so they were worried about knowing how much product they were sending through their pipelines and to whom. And they also lost confidence in their ability to run the pipeline if they had some computer issues. So if they had done some more resiliency planning, one, they'd know how to run the pipeline under extreme circumstances, but two, they'd have confidence that, if there was an intruder in their IT side, their billing side, that they could keep them out of the OT side.
Colonial Pipeline. They didn't lose operational control. They lost something more fundamental, confidence. Could they operate safely? They didn't know, so they shut everything down. Well, Rob explained what they lost using an example that has nothing to do with pipelines.
I run an absurd Christmas light show, pirate radio station, computer controlled, tens of thousands of blinking LEDs, synchronized to music, that kind of stuff. So I think there's a good cybersecurity metaphor here, right? I need to ensure that the controller, the brains for the whole operation that synchronizes everything. Do I have to protect a laptop, or do I have to protect my identity and access control server, right? If the controller goes down, the attackers are going to look to get to the controller of all of the things. And I can sacrifice an LED in an environment. It doesn't matter a lot if a laptop's not functioning, right? It really is, what are your critical controllers?
Protect the controller. Critical infrastructure is where things get existential.
Individuals who work in the critical infrastructure space, they do it because they're true servants. It's not an easy job. It's wildly stressful, and their hands are tied in a lot of situations, whether that be with understaffed, resource constraints as it relates to manpower, legacy technology that they're having to conquer. They are, in some sense, these like digital warriors / fighters that are protecting, our national security. What is the state of U.S. critical infrastructure? It's in a tough position right now. And there are a lot of people, both in the policy sphere, both operators, trying to figure out this problem very rapidly, as we're seeing, again, kind of the geopolitical climate shift.
Nation states aren't just preparing for cyber attacks, they're pre-positioning for them. Rob Joyce knows this better than most, right? He led NSA's elite hacking unit, the people who actually penetrate these networks.
When I was with the hackers at NSA, we were wildly successful. And why were we able to get into the networks that were the important places to gather foreign intelligence? It's because we knew those networks better than the people who owned and operated them.
The attackers knew the network better than the defenders.
Most organizations are resilient on paper and fragile in practice. And, these tabletop exercises and other things you can do, pen testing and red teaming, they show you some of the failure modes.
Resilient on paper, fragile in practice. Plans look perfect until someone has to execute them at 2 a.m. during an actual attack. So how do you close that gap?
Those guys, they are the most elite, the most practiced, and the way they get to that level is they practice and drill and rehearse over and over and over again for the scenarios. They practice how could they go wrong and practice failure modes. They do after action reviews, brutal after action reviews. Nothing ever goes according to plan. Nothing goes perfectly. Every time there's room for improvement.
Practice, drill, rehearse, repeat.
Resilient organizations don't improvise authority in a crisis. And so that means you've practiced. You've got to practice failure. You've got to give some unreasonable injects and conditions. You don't just do tabletop theater, where everybody wins. Who decides to shut us down, and will they have my backing at 2 a.m.? Have you talked through the authorities and the responsibilities and the decision levels? Are we going to pay a ransom? Who makes that decision in that call?
Because when it happens, and it's when, not if, the decision can't wait. At level 3 here in the maturity model, organizations have tested their cyber vaults. They've mapped their dependencies. They've documented their restart procedures. They're executing plans that have already been validated. But there is another piece. Strong identity and access management is critical for rapid organizational recovery. Why does that matter?
5 years ago, there was a lot of malware. There was a lot of custom written software that attackers wanted to get into your network to do bad things. As much as it feels like we're in this really dirty knife fight and some days don't look that great, we have gotten a lot better at a lot of things. And, the endpoint detection and response capabilities are keeping that malware from being downloaded to our machines and keeping a lot of the endpoints secure. And so attackers have shifted. Instead of getting that software to run on your machine, they've gone to steal the identities of people who have the authority to do something inside the network. That identity is a key to the kingdom, right?
Which means organizations need to know exactly which identities exist, what they can access, and whether they're still legitimate.
The biggest question is inventory and understanding the different agents and what their functions are, especially with the amount of agents being deployed. What is their function? What is their dependencies? How are we auditing them? How are we keeping humans in the loop? And, what type of permissions we're giving.
2017, NotPetya, same malware hits multiple companies. Some recover in weeks, others never fully recover. Why would that be?
One of the biggest myths in cyber is that, outcomes or an attack is driven by how sophisticated an attack was. When I think in reality, what's true is that it almost never explains the differences. Organizations that recovered understood something pretty basic from a technical perspective. And that was that identity comes first. And they knew how to rebuild domain controllers, reestablish trust, and bring systems back online in a very, very controlled sequence.
Identity comes first. Not exotic tools, not sophisticated techniques, basic operational knowledge. Tested, practiced, ready. And here's what matters. The organizations that recovered from NotPetya weren't at level 5 of the maturity model. They were maybe at level 3, maybe level 4, which tells you where most organizations actually need to focus. And that also brings us to quantum computing. Most people think it's 10 years out. Madison and Rob are tracking something a bit more urgent.
All this data collection that has been happening over the, let's just say, decades is really to this one seismic moment where either the Chinese or the Russians are going to have so much information that they can't decrypt today. But as soon as, Q day happens, then they're going to have, just masses and masses of information that they weren't able to, let's just say, read, now that they'll have at their fingertips.
Harvest now, decrypt later. But that's still thinking about confidentiality, protecting data from being read. Here's the part most people miss.
What many fail to appreciate is a lot of our authentication systems, the systems that log us into computers that protect the identities that we were talking about earlier, those kind of protections are underpinned by encryption. And so now quantum computers will give us a skeleton key into all of those systems that still use those older encryption methods to authenticate, to protect our identities.
Not just access to your data, access to identity, the ability to authenticate as anyone, unlock any system using vulnerable encryption.
This is a Y2K scale problem in that we have vulnerable algorithms everywhere, all over the place. Understanding, where your vulnerable encryption is and then driving it out of your ecosystem is going to be really important. The attackers will get good at finding those weak spots once quantum computers are practical and capable. And so we've got to be working now. We've got the time advantage. Let's start now.
The work to catalog where encryption is used, that takes years. Organizations at level 4 and level 5 maturity, well, they're inventorying right now. And when vendors start putting quantum safe on their data sheets, well, Madison's seen this movie before.
Our customers are not stupid. They're very much used to technology hype cycles, is what I'm going to call it. One of my first years walking the RSA floor, then, my God, visibility and, dashboards, well, they were the primary, right? And it was like machine learning. We use machine learning. And it was like really, it was, Ashley with a spreadsheet in the background, updating it on Tuesday. Right. And that was machine learning. And then it was AI, and we're like, everyone's using AI. And you're like, are we sure? Is it still actually, updating her Excel file or something that's a little bit more robust? The industry is a bit brazen and I would say hesitant because they've learned throughout these hype cycles and made investments into products that weren't necessarily fit the marketing one pager. And so the industry is starting asking the right questions. Okay, sure, this is powered by AI or you're being secured by AI. What does that actually mean? And how is AI being leveraged? So people are starting to get much more specific. And it relates to quantum. I think we'll see something very similar.
Machine learning that's actually manual updates. AI that's a human with an Excel file. Madison's watched vendors overpromise for years, but this time is different. The math is real, the threat is provable, and NIST has already certified quantum-resistant algorithms. So trust, but verify.
Some of the best hackers aren't the ones coming up with the most novel capabilities. They're the ones who are able to grind and find the cracks and seams that went unnoticed. And so that's the era we're entering, where you will be continuously attacked by AI agents.
Attackers are lazy. They're looking for the path of least resistance. And now we have the introduction of AI where they don't need the Red Bull. They don't need to be able to see it up.
AI doesn't get tired. It grinds continuously against every possible weakness.
We're going to have to use AI to fight AI, right? We're going to have to continuously red team ourselves so that we're jiggling all the doorknobs and trying the doors to see what opens before the attackers come and try those doorknobs, because it is inevitable.
Use AI to fight AI, not because it's cool, but because it's the only way to operate at the same scale that attackers are already operating. That's level 5 in the maturity model. But here's the thing, you don't wake up at level 5. Organizations build this capability in stages. Each stage solves specific problems. At level 1, you're reacting. Basic backups exist, but visibility is limited. When ransomware hits, you're scrambling. Level 2, this is where you bring discipline, immutable backups, data classification, your first cyber vault deployment. So you're not just reacting anymore, you're preparing. At level 3, things change again. This is where you've tested everything. IT and security work together. Zero trust identity is in place. Recovery isn't theoretical, it's proven. In other words, you've done it, you've practiced. Now, level 4, This is where you add intelligence, AI-driven detection, continuous optimization. You're starting to deploy quantum-resistant encryption. And level 5, well, that's autonomous response, adaptive resilience at scale, systems that learn and defend themselves. The maturity model shows you where you are and what comes next. Well, in our next episode, we're talking about moving from resilient strategy to restoration capability. How do you determine your organization's actual risk tolerance, what you're willing to lose versus what would break you? What do organizations discover when they test their recovery plans under pressure? And the reality that nobody wants to face, how do you restore business operations when the data dependencies that you rely on are suddenly gone? That's next time. The research, WWT's Cyber Resilience Maturity Model, it's linked below this video. Share it with your leadership. Use it to figure out where you actually are. Because the time to build resilience is before you need it, not when you're already under attack. I'm Rob Boyd. Thanks for watching WWT Presents Research.
This episode is supported by Dataminr. Dataminr delivers real-time alerts on high-impact events to help stay informed and respond promptly. Gain actionable insights with Dataminr's AI-driven alerting platform.